Welcome to Breaking Ties, Destination Divorce. This is your go-to source for practical advice and support while you go through the divorce process. Join us each weekday for a quick chat where we'll cover a variety of topics such as child custody, property division, and self-care. Together, we'll explore emotional, financial, and legal aspects of divorce and help you find the best path forward for you and your family. Here's your host and Certified Divorce Financial Analyst Professional, Mike Fulkerson.
Hello and welcome back to our fifth and final day of the week-long Breaking Ties interview series. We have been chatting this week with Margaret Zuleger, and she is a collaborative divorce attorney. And let me tell you, this week has been fantastic for information, and we're going to wrap it up with some more great information from Margaret. And Margaret actually has her own law practice, which is actually even more cool, I think. So we appreciate her coming on, and welcome back to the podcast, Margaret.
Thank you.
How's your day going so far?
Pretty good.
Excellent. Well, I tell you what, it's been great. Our listeners, really are getting a lot of information, and I couldn't ask for more. It's been fantastic. Now, we're on the last day of the series here, which is kind of a, shame, if you will. It's always been fun to have these discussions and learn more, because I even learned through this whole podcasting process. But we're going to finish up here with a couple process questions, because we talked about getting all the way through the process and everything on all the steps it takes. So we've talked about, a lot of, the easy stuff, if you will, as far as that goes. But sometimes, there could be drawbacks of a collaborative divorce. And would you be able to share a few drawbacks?
Sure. Well, one drawback would be if the process doesn't end in divorce because one person left the process and went to court. So that's always a shame.
Right.
And we try, not every case is appropriate for collaborative, and the collaborative professionals try to screen for cases to make sure that there's a really good chance of success. Most cases do end in a divorce successfully, but sometimes the process ends. Sometimes one person is just really not willing to compromise or listen to reason or whatever, and they just cannot be convinced by their attorney that going to court would not be a better solution, and they just don't believe it. I can't believe a judge wouldn't blah 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 blah. Okay, fine. You're gonna find out, and it's a shame because everybody has to start over. Both parties have to get their own attorney. The work that's been done can't be brought into litigation. The underlying data can be recreated, but what stays in what happens in collaborative stays in collaborative. So people really have to start over. And so then, of course, you start litigation with a real sense of failure that, one person's probably pretty upset that it's going to litigation. But if you still want to get divorced, then that's what happens.
Right.
So that's, to me, that's the only drawback in a collaborative case that you don't have in litigation. In litigation, unless you withdraw your petition and don't proceed with the divorce anymore, you are going to get divorced.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So, yes.
Yeah, and it goes back, I think, to the beginning when we talked, which was everybody's got to be vested into the collaborative process.
Definitely.
And so if you're not, or somebody's kind of, let's say, defensive, or they're not willing to compromise, then, like you said, collaborative is probably not the best choice for them.
Right. And or if they're not willing to be fully transparent. That's part of the agreement too, that everybody, full transparency. If a document is requested, then it's given. There's no saying you don't need to see that, and since we don't have a case filed, we can't subpoena the documents either. So it's full disclosure. Whereas in litigation, somebody could be difficult, although it turns out that always backfires on the person that's being difficult eventually. But, you can take a person who's being difficult and say, okay, fine. It's going to increase the cost of litigation, but I'll subpoena your bank and your employer and your investment company and your whatever, if people aren't giving the documents.
Right.
So that's like an aggressive, expensive thing to do, but it's something that you can do in litigation. That the collaborative process, we say, we're not going to do that. We're saying everybody gets everything they want. There's no withholding anything. But if somebody started the process and they weren't being honest about their willingness to do that, then sometimes that can break down the process. So that's one thing you screen for. Is somebody willing to be honest and transparent. If so, then collaborative will be successful.
Mhm.
Unless there are other issues. Sometimes are like emotional, like mental health issues too. It's not about the documents. It's not about the money. It's about, the kids or something. And
Right.
That's almost harder because then there's not even an even subpoena to get the answer for. It's you just have to you have to work it out.
Yes.
But again, but working it out in the collaborative process is better than having it worked out for you in litigation, because in that situation, if you can't agree on parenting, then a guardian ad litem is going to be appointed. That's an attorney who has special child, psychology training. They do an investigation of both parents. They talk to neighbors, friends, family, teachers, anything, and then give their recommendation to the judge about what the parenting, schedule and decision making should be. So, but then again, you've totally lost control. Once the GAL is involved, it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter what you want. If the GAL doesn't agree that that's in the best interest of the children, then the judge 9 times out of 10 is going to order what the GAL recommends. And so, so I mean, it's not like it's great in litigation at all.
Right. No, litigation is not any fun. Hardly any of the process is fun, no matter which way you take.
Right.
But litigation is definitely much more difficult as far as things go.
And talk about money. I mean, GALs charge attorney's fees on the higher end of attorney's fees. So then you have 3 attorneys involved in litigation, both spouses and the GAL. So that gets very expensive very quickly.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Well, once again, great information. I want to, kind of just get some final thoughts from you that you'd like to share with the listeners.
Yeah. So I think if divorce is going to happen, then I think collaborative is really the healthiest way to go through the divorce process. You are supported by a team. Everybody's encouraging everybody's best behavior, not their challenging behavior. And it's just really the best way to get through the process with everybody's interests in mind, and for the benefit of the children if you have them, so you can go on to co-parent after the divorce. And the divorce process itself hasn't made the relationship worse than it was coming into the divorce.
Right, exactly. Because there is life after divorce, and you
Absolutely.
still have to work with your co-parent if they're, if you have kids and stuff. And so,
Yep.
you still got, as a divorced parent, you still got your work cut out for you from that standpoint. But at the very least, you're able to move on in a lot of other aspects of your life, getting through the process and getting it through it as, say, painlessly as possible.
Exactly.
I think is probably the number one goal for most people getting a divorce. So collaborative process is definitely a good way to go for those goals.
Yes.
All right. Well, it's been great, Margaret. This ends our week-long series. Once again, the information you shared is nothing short of amazing, and a little insight into how things work is always good for people to just be knowledgeable on what their options are out there.
Right.
So, our listeners, if you haven't seen the previous 4 days of our discussion, I really recommend you go back and look at the whole series. Margaret did share some amazing information that I think everybody can take away a little something from. And for the last time, we're going to thank you for joining us on Breaking Ties, the interview series. And if you feel Margaret's services really could help you on the collaborative divorce side, don't hesitate to reach out to her. Her contact information is in our description of the podcast here. Divorce is not the end of your story. It is the start of your next great chapter. And with that, best of luck and take care.
Bye-bye.